Our topic is men are victims, and it really has an impact in more than one dimension, and I'll go into more detail about that, all right? But we know that it's a silent epidemic even within the church. So tonight we're going to talk about the fact that men are victims too, and it really has an impact in more than one dimension, and I'll go into more detail about that, all right? But we know that it's a silent epidemic even within the church. We're going to focus today on the fact that men are victims as well. The reality of it is, statistics show that they very rarely report. When they do, it's gotten so bad that they just can't do it anymore. It's gotten so bad, okay? And then when they do report, they may get ridiculed, it'll get dismissed, it'll get, you know what I'm saying? So they don't get help. So I don't know what's worse than desperately needing help, right? Finding the courage to seek help and then being ridiculed or being dismissed or being told just deal with it, or being told, well, you know, you're supposed to be a man, so why would you let her treat you this way? Why would you let him treat you this way? No one deserves to be called out of their name, all right? So there's a couple of statistics that I want to share with you. Hundreds of thousands of men experience domestic violence each year. This is worldwide, okay? According to data from the National Crime Victimization Study, between 2003 and 2012, men account for 24% of domestic violence survivors. They account for 24%. And those of us who are really entrenched in our faith would call it a generational curse, which is really only perpetuated by it being played out in front of us. It's played out in front of us. So this behavior has come to be considered the norm in our household. About 1 in 7 men ages 18 and above have experienced severe physical violence by an intimate partner. Now, when you talk about severe physical violence, you're talking about, and all of it is bad, but choking, you know, punching, those behaviors that 9 times out of 10 are going to cause a real physical injury, okay? So 1 in 7 men, starting at age 18, which is just barely, I mean, you're not even in your 20s yet. All right. And this is a tremendous problem for even teen dating. And that's another discussion altogether. This is a far spread problem. Okay. Also, 48.8%, almost half of all men have dealt with some kind of psychological aggression. All right. Now, let me just remind those of you who maybe haven't been following us the past several weeks that when we're talking about domestic violence, we're not only talking about when a fist meets a face. We're not just talking about when someone is pushed or shoved. It rarely starts that intensely in the beginning because the victim hasn't been groomed enough to put up with it. Okay, so there's a preparation process that takes place. And we could spend a whole hour on that alone. But if you're talking about an intimate partner relationship, then you're talking about most likely love bombing, where there's this inordinate amount of attention. You're beautiful, you're handsome, you're amazing, I've waited my entire life for you, and then, oh, let's get married. Okay, now, a healthy person might be a little freaked out by a marriage proposal inside of a week or two. But if you are a victim of domestic violence, even in childhood, that might be appealing to you because it feels like you found a safe place. The flip side of that same coin is, I know people who have grown up in homes where their families, their parents didn't fight. They demonstrated love and affection for each other. They did things as a family. And yet they find themselves in abusive relationships as well. How can that happen? How can you have your family, you've been married 40 years, 45 years, 50 years or whatever, right? You've not engaged in this behavior behind closed doors or in front of your children. You've demonstrated for them, what a healthy relationship looks like, how do they then find themselves in an abusive relationship? Someone who does not have, if they just give them more time, if they're more patient, you know what I mean, they become a project. So people who come from a solid background tend to take on these projects, and they think that they can be good enough, nice enough, supportive enough, understanding enough to change them. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. So a person who has these tendencies will be drawn to someone who has no history at all, because that's like a clean slate, and the sky's the limit. Okay? You got that solid background. You've got all this potential. You probably have a good income or the ability to get one. You've got stars in your eyes. You think everybody's wonderful. Perfect, perfect target. Or you have a history of domestic violence, okay? And it's like a shark in blood. They can smell that. They know that. They know it. Especially if, listen, and we're going to get to the men soon, but I need for y'all, men and women, to stop telling people, hi, my name is Cheryl, and I have a history of domestic violence, and this is what they did to me. And I really want somebody in my life. And I really, 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 really would appreciate it if you didn't punch me in my face, if you didn't do this, if you didn't put me in a position where I had to call the police, if you didn't take my credit cards and my car keys or lock me up. You know what they'll say? That's terrible. You're amazing. I cannot believe. How could anybody in their right mind treat you that way? You don't have to worry about that with me. Fast forward, 9 times out of 10, what do you think happens? Everything you just described and worse. And the added insult is, here's the self-talk. But I told him or her that it would destroy me if that happened. I told them that I could not live through that again. Well, they're narcissists, and they're not really interested in you living at all. That's not their concern. They're concerned about supply. And what you've done is told them exactly how to break you. You've told them how to crush you, okay? So it's really important that when we have this kind of history, that if, before we get in a relationship, okay, you go to AA or one of these other, organizations, and they tell you, do not get in a relationship while you are in treatment, okay? If you have a history of domestic violence, and I'm saying this as a mental health professional, okay? If you have that history from childhood or adulthood, do not get married, do not make a baby, do not get into a relationship until you go and work on your stuff. What am I saying? If you have a history of domestic violence at all, get some help regarding your self-esteem, how you feel about yourself, the direction you want your life to take. And it's not too late. It doesn't matter how old you are, okay? Okay, back to men. So we talked about the fact that 48.8% of all men have dealt with some kind of psychological aggression. And we talked about why they don't report it, because they don't get help. And some of the meanest people in the world are people who have domestic violence histories. You would think, if you're from the school that everybody's got good in them, which they don't, okay? But if you're from that school, if that's your school of thought, then you would think that another victim would be understanding. Not necessarily. That victim may be full of rage and anger, and it may very well be misplaced. And if they've not addressed it, because if they have addressed it, then they won't be full of rage and anger. They will have come to grips with what they have experienced and put it in its proper place, and they'll be able to move on with life. There may be times when things pop up that remind them, but they understand that that's not where they are today, and they understand their value as a human being, and they understand what the red flags are, and they're not hesitant to step off if they see it, okay? You'll know that you are on the way to healing, and that you're reaching a healthy place, whether you're a man or a woman, when you don't need to give an individual another chance, with a scripture on top, okay? We're supposed to be understanding and forgiving, okay? When we step outside of the bounds of the Word of God, now we're out there on our own. God is obligated to honor what He has said, not what we wish He said, right? They call you out of your name. When you no longer need to make an excuse for that, you are on your way to getting better. When you can accept, that's a red flag, And 9 times out of 10, there's more where that came from. Okay? And for men and women both, stop making people your project. People don't do that. Let the one who created them work on them. You're not going to call me out of my name. You're not going to be screaming and yelling like a banshee. You're not going to suck all the oxygen out the room. If we wait, whoever this is for, if you wait long enough, let me tell you something. This is something that I learned. I'm telling you, it works every time. If you want to know what you're really dealing with, tell them no and wait. That's all you got to do. Just tell them no. It doesn't even have to be anything major. Just tell them no and wait. What is the response to no? Because anything other than, oh, wow, I really hate to hear that. Maybe we can do this another time, or maybe you'll have time to talk to me another time. Anything other than that is a complete disrespect for the boundary that you just established. And that is only the beginning. All right. So we were talking about men. 29% of rapes on men were committed by an intimate partner. That could be male or female. And remember now, when we're talking about relationships, it could be a same-sex relationship, okay? And church folk getting all appalled or whatever. People are people, and nobody deserves to be mistreated. They do not. Or violated, period, okay? If we approve of their lifestyle or not, if we think something's wrong with it or not, whatever we think the cause is, where it came from, whatever. God caused it, he didn't. However you feel about it, at the end of the day, it's just wrong. It's just wrong, okay? Men are victims in about 6% of murder-suicides where the offender is an intimate partner. So 6% for men, okay? 10.4%, or approximately 11.7 million men in the U.S. have reported having an intimate partner get or attempt to get pregnant without their agreement. So let's talk about men and what men go through. And if there's any men that want to chime in, feel free. Domestic violence starts off like manipulation. Remember we talked about that. It very rarely starts off physical. And then it escalates over time to pushing, shoving, slapping, choking, which has become such a great problem worldwide. It's crazy. That now even in the United States, in many of our states, it's a felony to even put your hands around somebody's neck. That's a felony. It's a felony charge if you choke somebody. You put your hands, because it's out of control. It's out of control. Now let me just say this, because I could do a whole Facebook Live just on strangulation alone, okay? If you are in a situation and that occurs, obviously you want to calm them down and do whatever you need to do to get them calm so they get their hands off of your neck. Many victims, when they experience strangulation, don't seek medical attention. So even if you don't lose consciousness, you should seek medical attention. If you do and regain consciousness, then certainly you should seek medical condition. Because in my research for this, I learned that it's possible for you to die weeks later, days later, from an injury that you suffered internally when you were strangled. Okay? So it's important to do that. It's important also to know that most of the time, the abuser's not really trying to kill you today, right now necessarily, but wants you to know that they can. That they can. Okay? They want you to know that they can. That if you live or die is in their hands. Okay? Now, if you're in a domestic violence situation right now, first of all, if you ever feel like you're in imminent danger, things have escalated, fists are going through walls, you being threatened, a weapon has been introduced or whatever, I keep telling you guys, you need a safety plan. If you're going to stay with that craziness, you need a safety plan. You need a safety plan to stay. You need a safety plan to exit, the actual physical departure. You need a well thought out plan for that, okay? And you need a plan after you're gone, because 30 to 90 days or so is really kind of it's a high tension area time frame for the abuser. So you're really at increased risk after you leave for 30 to 90 days or so. 30 to 90 days. That one young lady was telling me earlier this week that she'd been divorced from her ex for 5 years. And he almost killed her 5 years later. Couldn't find her, then went and killed his current girlfriend and one of her relatives. And this is 5 years after. So what happens if your abuser, whether they're male or female, let's say they've gotten sentenced to jail or they've gone to prison or whatever. In your mind, that 30 to 90 day period happened when the police took them away in handcuffs. In the abuser's mind, that time frame didn't really start until they got released from prison. There's nothing that they're going to do in prison that's going to make them feel any more pleasant about you as the victim. More likely than not, they're going to be convinced that you're the problem and that you started it and that you ruined their life. And so, whereas you may have had 3 or 4 or 5 years, right, of kind of peace and quiet and being able to try to rebuild your life and go forward, you have to keep their perspective in mind. That for them, it's brand new. For them, they're trying to come back and rebuild their life. They're being reminded of everything that they lost, the fact that they feel that it's your fault. So be aware of that. Be aware of that. And as I always say, do not say, okay, we're going to have a heart-to-heart talk. Now, you punched me in my face last week, and that's really not okay. It's not nice. And then you choked me the week before that. And before that, you were calling me names, and you promised that you would stop, and you didn't stop. If you do it again, I'm going to leave. Don't do that. Don't do that. Some things need to just stay in your head, okay? Do not say it. In anger, do not say it because you're trying to manipulate them at that point because they've already established who they are. So when we have that conversation, now we're trying to manipulate them into not hurting us anymore. Which means that we're missing the entire fact that they draw strength and a sense of power from hurting and crushing and damaging. So it's not going to stop, okay? Well, he or she has a history of domestic violence. He or she witnessed their mother or father do this. They were treated like this as a child. Okay. That just means they're not ready to be in a relationship. They are broken. They're broken. They're broken. And if you find that appealing, you're also broken. Okay? The knowledge that the Bible is talking about is not our ability to just like quote scripture, right? We have a responsibility, especially those of us in leadership, those of us with a following, those of us that we know God has anointed us and people listen to us. We have a responsibility to give them sound advice and take off the rose-colored glasses and stop sprinkling fairy dust, okay? God is not a genie. We're not rubbing a lamp here and, he's going to change Ray Ray into somebody wonderful. If Ray Ray has issues, okay, then Ray Ray needs help. And if Ray Ray has disrespected you, statistics show he's not going to get it together with you. Because in his heart of hearts, he knows he can have you without getting it together, okay? All right, so I told you that 10.4% or approximately 11.7 million men in the U.S. have reported having an intimate partner get pregnant, set them up to get pregnant, or whatever. Now, for those of us who would say, well, it takes 2 to tango, okay, fine. It does take 2. But if you have a conversation with someone, and I don't care if you're married, really you should have the conversation before you get married. I want 10 kids, well, I don't want none. Well, that's a problem. So for you to arrange to get pregnant is abusive. And it's manipulative. It really, truly is. And you're setting the stage for a whole lot of resentment and angst and frustration and craziness. And you're going to probably end up raising a baby by yourself. Or they're going to have a very angry parent, which is also not good. Okay? So it's abusive. Whenever you don't respect a boundary that someone has established in a relationship, it's abusive. And if their boundary is in conflict with what you want and you desire in your life, then what is that? That's God saying this is not what you need to do because that's not what they want to do. They don't want what you want. They're not going in the same direction. And it doesn't mean that either one of you are wrong. You're just not supposed to take this trip together, okay? And when we can accept those things and educate ourselves about these things, we can save ourselves a lot of grief. Okay. Nearly 1 in 18 men have been stalked by an intimate partner to the point that they were scared for their life and safety or that of their loved ones. Stalking is abuse. I'm going to say it again. Stalking is abuse, and it's really creepy, and it's really, really potentially dangerous, because what happens from a psychological standpoint is, just checking the phone is not enough after a while. Okay, now they get in the car, or you getting in the car, and you trailing them to see where they going, right? Then you're going to sit outside wherever they went and see who comes out. You're going to see how long they stay in there. These things, and this is how the enemy slips in, it will take over your thought process, and you will find yourself rearranging your life so that you can keep up with this individual and what they're doing in their life. Okay? A person with a healthy sense of self and with an accurate sense of their own self-worth and a respect for themselves because of who God created them to be. If you're not interested, you're just not interested. Okay. All right. One way to look at that is say, well, you're just too foolish to be in my life anyway, because I'm amazing. If you can't tell I'm amazing, then you're too stupid to be in my life. So it's okay. It's all right. Go with God. That's what we need to be able to do. Instead of trying to make people want us, try to make people want to stay with us, make them want to toe the line. If you've got to go through all of that, then you're setting yourself up. Okay? So what happens emotionally from a mental health standpoint with stalking is very, very dangerous, because oftentimes it will increase to a forceful act, and people can die. Not only the target, but whoever the abuser views as the problem. It can be another man, it can be another woman, it can be a relative that they feel is speaking against them, or whatever, okay? Become a target. Okay. Nearly 8% of males who have reported domestic violence have been shot at, stabbed, or hit with a weapon. Nearly 8%. That's a lot. An estimated 5% of male homicide victims annually are killed by an intimate partner. Okay? So, really want you to understand that men can be victims of domestic violence as well. My advice for them is the same as it is for a woman, that if you have this history, you don't have to wait until you get into a relationship or whatever. You got issues. Come on, you got issues. You don't trust people. Whatever your issue is, you got issues because they have already been surfacing in your life, right? If we could, even in the church, learn to address things, get in front of them so that we're not constantly reacting to, picking up the pieces, right? Pretending to be healed and delivered and set free when in fact we are not. When we can walk in a healthy place, we are able to recognize unhealthy when it's standing in front of us, and the head doesn't have to be spinning around, and they don't have to be spitting out green stuff for us to figure it out. All right? This is where discernment comes in. You're able to recognize unhealthy when you see it, and you're able to step off and walk away. And you don't feel an obligation to explain why. Just disengage. The earlier this is done in a relationship, the better. Okay? In the mind of an abuser, they feel that they have invested something in you. Their time, their emotions. I don't know, they bought you a lamp. I don't know, they bought you dinner at an expensive restaurant. They paid your rent. They paid your mortgage. They did all these things. They're investing. The Bible says that where a man's treasure is, that's where his heart is. So wherever we are investing our time and our resources, that's where our heart is. Wherever we are investing what we have worked for, what we care about, our time, something that once it's gone, we don't get it back. Whatever we're investing that in, that's a serious investment because you can't get it back, right? You cannot get it back. So unless the person that you're investing this time in values your time, right? Values your time and purposes in their heart to reciprocate, Anything less than that, you've got an out of balance situation. Okay? So, in all of these cases that escalated to murder, suicide, these horrific acts, at what point was the point of no return reached? And so we have to pay attention. We have to pay attention because we can't prevent anything. We can't support anyone if we are so self-absorbed that we don't notice that something is off. Okay? So what's the point of no return? Let's take a relationship. It can be male, female, I don't care. Same sex, immaterial to me what it is. Okay? There's a point in the relationship that you have invested so much that the other part of that relationship, that other individual, is going to be offended if you break it off. So the key is to pay attention up front. Get yourself to a healthy place so that you can recognize things, so that the Spirit of God can talk to you and prompt you about what to pay attention to, right? And then you have the strength to step back and say, you know what? I'm not going to do this. If you do it before they feel, not before you feel, before they feel they have invested too much, you have a better chance of being able to walk away from that unscathed. But when we tolerate the behavior, if it's a man and he's being cursed out by this woman, she's talking loud to him, she's trying to get him to go to bed, and he's trying to live right, and he don't want to have sex before marriage, and she keeps trying to get him to do that. These are all boundary violations. It's all disrespect. All of it is disrespect. But if we stay engaged, we have given them permission to go to the next step, and go to the next step, and go to the next step. And since this has nothing at all to do with how amazing we are as victims, this entire conversation is taking place in their head. It ain't got nothing to do with you. You're not invited to the conversation. All right? And you don't get to vote in the decision that's made at the end of the conversation that happens in their head either. So in their mind, well, you know what? I've spent $100 on dinner 3 times. I spent the night over there 2 or 3 times. We are item. We are a couple. And then you decide, okay, I'm breaking this off. And they think, hold up. You're not leaving me. I've invested all this time in you that I cannot get back. I have stopped seeing other people. I have bought you a lamp. I have paid your rent. I paid your mortgage. I paid your car note. Right? The cutoff is not the cutoff in the target or the victim's mind. It's the cutoff in the abuser's mind. The best way around that, this is free. I'm giving you all advice. I'm telling you, trying to help somebody. Pay for your own stuff. You're not married to them. Buy your own lamp. Pay your own car note. Do not take from someone if you can't deal with the possibility that they completely lose their natural mind if you have to tell them no about anything. Okay? So with any relationship, there's that first phone call, right? There's that first meeting at the mall or at church or wherever. And when I hear about instances where people are killed, I wonder, what should have been the last phone conversation they had? What was the point at which, if they had stepped out then, they could have gotten away? Without the abuser feeling like they had invested so much. Okay? Don't take stuff from folk. Don't let people do what they're not responsible to do. If you're not married to them, you are not their wife, you are not their husband, you are not their responsibility, okay? Don't do that. Don't do, because you don't know what they're doing with that in their head. And they can say it's no problem. But the first time you have to tell them no about something that matters to them, it can escalate into a problem, okay? So, we're going to wrap up here. I want you to understand that men are victims too. Men are victims too, okay? One more thing. Okay, I'm a domestic violence victim, and, my parent was wackadoodle, and he was a domestic violence victim and his parent was wackadoodle, and together we can rule the world. No, 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 no. From a spiritual perspective, that's a familiar spirit. And familiar spirits attach themselves to us so that things can stay the same, not so that they can change and get better. Okay? Two broken people don't make a whole person. They do not. And so, if you come into contact with someone like that, all right, and you know you are broken, I'm going to tell you like we tell people that go to AA or NA or whatever, do not stare across the room and get stars in your eyes about somebody with the same history that you had. Because neither one of you know how to do it the right way. So now what's going to happen? What's going to happen now? Okay? Understand that men can be victims. And if they're in church, or if they were raised, especially those same examples that I gave in the very beginning, hold true. Because if they were raised in a family where there was no domestic violence and everybody loved each other and ate dinner together and took family vacations and actually liked each other, right? They may feel that they want to rescue, help, support, nurture. Bad idea. Bad idea. Bad idea. That person, the wounded person, the broken person, needs to be encouraged to go to counseling, therapy, whatever. And not until they're in a healthy place should they be entertaining a relationship. And if you're already healthy, you absolutely shouldn't be entertaining one. It's a bad idea. Okay? So, you get involved with someone who's in treatment for whatever reason. They're in rehab for whatever reason. You will absolutely circumvent their progress by interjecting yourself at that point in time. You're going to, at the very least, you are going to slow up any progress that they make because now you've become a distraction. Okay? So allow them to work on their issue. 9 times out of 10, if you have a need to rescue, when they reach the point where they don't need rescuing, you're not going to have nothing to talk about. If they need for you to be broken and downtrodden and depressed and suicidal, that's not who, God did not send them to you. They're not going to know what to do with you. They're not going to know what to do with you. When you hit a place of healing, it's going to be a problem. So then, now you have to make a decision. Do I continue getting better? Or do I stay sick so I can maintain this relationship? Okay? Everything that I've said applies to men as well as women. If they are in the church, it's really hard, to go to your pastor if you're a man and say, well, this is what's happening to me. Number one, we've got this thing that we're supposed to be covering our spouses. Covering, right? And so not exposing them, not talking about our relationship outside of the relationship and all of that. The problem with that is domestic violence, it grows, it gets worse and intensifies in darkness, just like every other evil thing in the earth. It needs darkness. It needs for good people to do nothing. It needs for people to not recognize that they are in bondage, okay, in order to flourish. Exposing it as early as possible is what needs to happen. It needs to be done in a safe manner. We need to not turn people off and shut them down. We need to understand that everybody exits at their own pace, if ever. They may never get to a place where they want to exit, okay? We need to learn how to be supportive and not say things that send them right back into the abuser's clutches.